Good afternoon and welcome to the LFS Podcast. We're back for the brand new 24-25 season here in LFS. We got underway with our football coverage at the weekend, and we are back with the LFS Podcast for a brand new season. I ended last season with quite a number of the Euro specials, and it was fantastic. Great to have you with us this afternoon for the LFS Podcast. Coming up on today's show, as you would have seen in the title, we're going to talk about transfers, the big transfer news, some of the latest stories, including that one on the thumbnail as well. Conor Gallagher could be on the move. Chelsea could be selling more of their young players coming up. We'll talk about the Scottish Premiership, got underway at the weekend. We'll also have a look ahead to match week 2 and what are the repercussions. Plus, we have a live game in the Scottish Premiership this weekend. We'll also talk pre-season. Of course, a lot of Premier League clubs with their pre-season fixtures all going in different ways. Some clubs having mixed results and some off to a perfect start. Liverpool as a hint. We'll also look ahead at the Community Shield this Saturday as well. Between Manchester United and Manchester City, a Manchester Derby Community Shield, of course. And we'll also talk about the Champions League qualifying. Rangers were in action last night amongst other clubs, and we'll talk about that. So, a lot to get through in the LFS podcast. Great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us for a brand new season here at LFS. Our third season, actually, of having the LFS podcast and also having LFS on the go, and it's great that you continue to join us and continue to enjoy these moments. Right, let's get underway then. Let's get to business and let's get right down to it and start with the transfers this afternoon. And the first of our big stories this afternoon has been one that's been kind of talked about and put in headlines for the last couple of days about Chelsea and Conor Gallagher. Now, this is the storyline that's come out this morning. Of course, there was a bit of updates from yesterday when I was writing the kind of the agenda for the show on what to talk about. This one has been updated as of recently. So let me just run you through the latest of what has come through. So Chelsea and Atletico Madrid are close to finalising the deals for Conor Gallagher and Samu Amorodion after agreeing on a new fee of £38 million for each player. That's €42 million. Now, and initially what we thought yesterday, there was no hint of a kind of a swap idea with money involved, but that was the idea. Gallagher has now been given permission to fly to Madrid with a medical schedule for later this week, but is expected to sign a 5-year contract. The deals are not closed yet, but sources involved have told Sky Sports News that they are getting very close. So, Conor Gallagher could be on the move. Remember, he did go on loan to Crystal Palace a few seasons ago. He's kind of established himself in the last year or two at Chelsea in that midfield role. And actually, for moments of last season, actually took up the captain's armband for Chelsea when their two main, their captain and vice captain, club captain and vice captain, were injured. Of course, Ben Chilwell and Reece James, and Conor Gallagher on multiple occasions last season did take up the captain's armband. So he's a big player, kind of an important player under Mauricio Pochettino last season. And interesting, of course, the new manager Enzo Maresca, and we'll get into talk about Chelsea's pre-season a bit later in the show. But ultimately, under the new manager, clearly they must be in a bit of bother, Chelsea, or they must want kind of a difference in midfield, whether it's what the manager wants in Enzo Maresca and whether kind of he wants a different dynamic of a player for midfield. I don't know very much about Samu Amordian. I apologise if I'm butchering that name, by the way, but I don't know very much about him. So maybe Chelsea have had that look, and we'll see kind of what comes of that. Now, there is some more developments about Atletico. They've been very busy over the last couple of days, but this Conor Gallagher stuff really interests me because I thought, new manager, a young player, a player that has established himself last season, looked to be important in the midfield, but ultimately Chelsea are looking to sell. I mean, as I mentioned, a youth player came through the ranks at Chelsea, went on loan to Crystal Palace and really impressed, and that's what got him his opportunity in the Chelsea first team. And kind of interestingly, they're going to have to sell him off now. I'm baffled. I'm wondering why, but I'm sure Chelsea will give us ample opportunity to talk about it. In terms of Amordian, of course, this is all to do with this involvement of Conor Gallagher going one way and Immortan going the other. So Chelsea's deal to sign striker Immortan has hinged on Atletico getting a replacement for the player, of course. Immortan scored 8 goals in 35 La Liga appearances last season while on loan at Deportivo Alaves. Now, Chelsea accepted a deal in the region of £34 million from Atletico last week after not finding a consensus with Gallagher over a new contract to keep him at Stamford Bridge. 2 other top 6 Premier League clubs asked Chelsea about Gallagher in the past few days, but of course he has decided to join Atletico. So we're just awaiting on everything being finalised. Now, Gallagher had made his decision, made his final decision just 1 minute before the deadline at the end of the weekend. So, of course, kind of leaving it late to make a decision on what he wanted to do with his future. But Chelsea had accepted a larger bid from Aston Villa for Gallagher this summer, but of course he rejected the move to Villa Park and wanted to stay at Stamford Bridge. And Tottenham were also interested in a move, but that would have been controversial. But he wants to go to Spain. An eye up on the Spanish lifestyle, Conor Gallagher, surely. Who knows? We'll see, and we'll see if it works out for him, because we'll find out over the next coming days and weeks what is to happen there. But Conor Gallagher is the big story this afternoon, involved in a move to Atletico Madrid. Speaking of Atletico, another big story involving them, and they have also pulled out the cash. I mean, I don't know where they're getting the money from, but they've pulled out more cash from somewhere. Atletico Madrid have agreed an £81.5 million deal to sign Manchester City forward Julian Alvarez. The fee is made up of an initial £64.5 million with a further £17 million in potential add-ons. It'd be a record sale for Manchester City if it were to happen, surpassing the £50 million Chelsea paid for Raheem Sterling in 2022. Alvarez said he would wait until Argentina's involvement in the 2024 Olympics football ended before making a decision on his future. The team, of course, were knocked out by the hosts France last Friday in the Olympics, so City manager Pep Guardiola had been keen to keep the 24-year-old, and said earlier in August he counted on Alvarez before the start of the season. Well, I don't think he's going to be counting on him any longer. £81.5 million overall, that deal. Initial £64.5 million at €75 million. Atletico looking to reinvent themselves. Julian Alvarez, one of the top kind of what you would call. He's unlucky to be at Manchester City because he would be a starter anywhere else in the Premier League. Julian Alvarez up front, having Erling Haaland ahead of him, maybe contributed to this decision, saying that maybe he didn't think that there was ever going to be a future for him, that he was ever going to get first place, and trying to stop Erling Haaland or trying to displace Erling Haaland in a Manchester City team is almost impossible. So maybe that would come into his thinking. Of course, Atletico want him. He wants to go with Atletico. Atletico, of course, in previous seasons have gone for the more older veteran idea of a forward. I mean, up till recently they had Alvaro Morata in that centre forward role, but of course he's made a move off elsewhere. Atletico want to reinvent that forward line clearly. And bring in Julian Alvarez, and then of course Conor Gallagher in midfield. So they're certainly scouring the English market, Atletico Madrid, and it seems they're getting a bit of joy. In total, those two deals would come to over £100 million, but of course it's not really much of a difference. It's more of a player swap in the Chelsea Atletico case, because one's going one way and the other's coming the other way, and there's very little difference in money being exchanged, maybe $1 million or two either way. Right, so those are our top two stories, both involving Atletico. To a story from a few days ago, West Ham United have been very active in the transfer window, of course, with their new manager Julian Lopetegui coming in to the side and wanting to really kind of get to grips with what West Ham can do. Of course, David Moyes took them to European football on multiple occasions, and they finished 9th last season, West Ham United, which a top half finish isn't kind of the worst in the world for West Ham, considering who they have been up against and who kind of was above them. But ultimately, I'm sure they're wanting to invest, wanting to build, wanting to look for more in that sense, and we'll see if they're to do that. At the moment, it seems like they're completely scouring the market and taking everybody with them. They signed Nicholas Füllkrug, as I said, for £27 million from Borussia Dortmund. Of course, was in the Champions League final. The 31-year-old, he joined Dortmund from Werder Bremen last summer. He scored 15 goals in 46 games in the 23-24 season and finished as a Champions League runner-up, of course, played in that final. Got them to that final after scoring that great goal against PSG in the semi-final of the Champions League last season. He also netted twice against during host Germany, Germany's run to the Euro 2024 quarter-final, of course, but he did not start a match, but he's got that kind of super sub mentality. He's pictured in the middle of the graphic there. And by the quote, I'm delighted to be here. You can see he's delighted by that picture, and I can't wait to get out onto the pitch with my new teammates, who said Füllkrug, who signed a 4-year deal. I think the Premier League is the best league in the world, and for me it is the right time to move over to England and play for a big club like West Ham. I've been thinking about West Ham for a long time now. I know the technical director, Tim Stuyten, very well, because we have history at Werder Bremen together, and I've watched some games and seen how much quality there is in the team. Füllkrug is the 5th signing made by new West Ham boss Julian Lopetegui this summer, following the arrivals of former Wolves captain Max Kilman for £40 million, Dutch forward Crescencio Somerville from Leeds for more than £25 million, Wes Foderingham, the goalkeeper from Sheffield United, and Brazilian winger Luis Guilherme for £25.5 million from Palmeiras. They have also, in the last day, also made a new deal for Guido Rodriguez as well from Real Betis on a free. So West Ham certainly getting their job done, and they are busy in the market. 6 signings in total for West Ham United, and they're getting them done at the right time. They want to integrate them before the league starts in about 9 days' time. The Premier League is not that far away from getting back underway, and West Ham certainly want to have improvements and some new signings to show for it. To the man on the left-hand side of that graphic there, Joe Gomez, of course, a bit of kind of interest from Newcastle, of course, earlier in the window, very early in the window actually, at the end of June. It was, so over a month ago, there were apparently some murmurings that Liverpool were maybe in for Anthony Gordon, and that Joe Gomez might be involved in that kind of deal to go the other way, up to the northeast. But of course that deal broke down. There was no real interest. Liverpool didn't want to sell Joe Gomez, according to the feelings that he's going to be an integral player for the new season under Arne Slot. But the question marks still arise whether Joe Gomez will be on the move. It looks unlikely because, of course, with his he got in his recent Instagram post, talked about season 10. Was the caption, so it looks like he's going to continue with Liverpool. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into that, but it looks like season 10 would be his 10th season with Liverpool this season, and it looks unlikely that he will move. On the Anthony Gordon stuff, there is still interest from Liverpool, but there is no more to say on that situation, because at the moment there's no formal talks in place. Although there is some interest in Liverpool. Before we move on to talks elsewhere, speaking on Liverpool, there has been an update today, this afternoon. Of course, Liverpool, the only club in the Premier League out of the 20 teams to have not signed any player this summer yet, but very kind of reputable journalists from inside and in and around the Liverpool scene, the likes of David Ornstein, Paul Joyce, etc., have all kind of hinted that Liverpool are going to be active in the market this summer, and that they will be making a few signings before the deadline, of course, on the 30th of August, 23 days away. But Martin Zubimendi has been the one that's been named this afternoon. Of course, David Ornstein a few days ago in an article talked about Liverpool wanting a number 6, having picked out a number 6, but an unnamed player. At that point, the player wasn't named, but it seems from updates today from David Ornstein, very reputable journalist Paul Joyce as well, have both said that Martin Zubimendi is that player that Liverpool are interested in. If he was to move, it would be for a £51 million release clause in the player's contract. He played the second half of the Euro 2024 final, of course, in which Spain became European champions for Real, and the Real Sociedad player is of high interest at 25 years old, and we'll see how that one develops. But at the moment, that is a latest story from this afternoon, and that was reported a bit earlier on. So Martin Zubimendi could be Liverpool's first signing, but that could be premature. We've seen it before, where transfers have been looked nearly done and ended up collapsing. but let's not scud the situation. Moving on. More transfer talk as well. Matt O'Reilly, the Celtic midfielder, who played a blinder against Caoimhan at the weekend. We'll talk about that a bit later on in the show. But Matt O'Reilly, an incredible midfielder, popped up with incredible amounts of goals last season. 18 Scottish Premiership goals last campaign, 13 assists. That's 31 goal involvements in total, and he's been a hot topic for a lot of Premier League clubs. Chelsea have been interested, amongst other clubs. Atalanta made a few bids that Celtic rejected over the last few weeks. He is a hot topic, and certainly one that sees a lot of interest from Premier League clubs, and we'll see if Matt O'Reilly will be on the move. But at the moment, there are no concrete movements, but there was interest from Chelsea. There were bids on the table from Atalanta that were rejected. Celtic desperate to hang on to the player. Of course, his quality is unmatched, and that Celtic midfield that we saw the weekend at this moment in time looks rigid, strong, and very fluid, and it looks beautiful to watch. And Matt O'Reilly leaving would be a massive blow to Celtic at this point of the season, but we'll see if anything happens. And finally, Tottenham could be in the lookings for a new striker. Dominic Solanke of Bournemouth, of course, is an interest of Tottenham's. There are talks ongoing for a possible move between the two parties. Solanke, of course, joined Bournemouth quite a number of years ago now from Liverpool, of course. And interestingly, there was news updated that Liverpool could get 20% of any sell-on from Dominic Solanke. That was agreed with Bournemouth when they made that deal a number of years ago. So there is talks on that happening, but of course nothing concrete yet. There are talks between Tottenham and Bournemouth over the deal for Dominic Solanke, but nothing has been decided yet, and we will wait and see. So there's interest, talks, and a lot of drama, but so far not much on the signing front. I guarantee you now that about the majority of the players that we talked about, Conor Gallagher, Julian Alvarez, Matt O'Reilly probably, Dominic Solanke, Martin Zubimendi, we'll probably all see the flurry of transfer reveals in those little photos where you see them holding up the club shirt. They'll probably all come out within a 20-minute radius of each other. But at the moment, they're all talks and they're all in the conversation, but nothing has been finalised yet in that sense. Right, that is the transfer latest. We will have further updates, anything to bring you. We will talk about it. One point to make. Some interesting stories developing this afternoon. Lee Carsley, the England under-21s manager, could be likely to take interim charge of England in the process when they look for a long-term option, long-term replacement for Gareth Southgate, who of course resigned, stood down from the position after the defeat in the Euro 2024 final. Lee Carsley could be in his place, and also Alvaro Morata and Rodri this afternoon have been banned for one game at international level after they chanted "Gibraltar is Spanish" during their side's Euro 2024 victory celebrations. The Gibraltar Football Association made an official complaint about the celebrations to European football's governing body before the pair were charged. UEFA have now suspended Morata and Rodri for failing to comply with the general principles of conduct, for violating the basic rules of decent conduct, for using sporting events for manifestos of a non-sporting nature, and for bringing the sport of football, and UEFA in particular, into disrepute. They are banned for Spain's next international game, which is against Serbia on September the 5th. So, that's all from that front. Let's move on to the Scottish Premiership. And the new season in the Scottish Premiership brought some action, brought some drama, and brought some excitement with it. It took a while to get to that point. The two games on your left-hand side of your screen there, Hearts against Rangers and Motherwell Ross County, with the Saturday offerings, both ended 0-0. Dundee United and Dundee FC got the Sunday afternoon underway with a four-goal thriller in that game and a 2-2 draw in the Dundee derby. St Mirren were the first team to win in the new season, a 3-0 win over Hibs. Celtic convincing victors over Kilmarnock at Celtic Park in the Flag Day in Glasgow. And St Johnstone, favourites to be relegated this season, well, they were beaten to Aberdeen on the Monday night. So, those were the opening 6 games. Hearts and Rangers, interesting, of course. Philippe Clermont's side, a new challenge, a new prospect, a new kind of vibe about Rangers, that they're going for long-term future plans. Well, so far, they'll be thankful they're going for the long term, because on the short term, it wasn't the best result. They were poor, they were sloppy, they were inaccurate. It was a competitive game in that front between Hearts and Rangers, but I think Hearts were the better side. Neither side could find the finish. Really good goalkeeping from both goalkeepers. But ultimately, Philippe Clermont's side, whether they like it or not, are already 2 points behind their nearest opponents for the title in Celtic, of course. They dropped points in the season opener and weren't convincing at all in front of goal. Of course, had 1 or 2 injury issues. Of course, they do have European football. They did have European football in midweek, so maybe that could have come into the thinking. But of course, an opening day result away at Hearts. It's not the worst result in the world for Rangers. A draw isn't a horrible result, and the fact that they weren't open at the back, Hearts did have a few chances but couldn't score, is promising. But I would say Rangers a bit of work to do. Celtic, of course, is the other big story of the weekend. Their comfortable victory over Kilmarnock, 4-0 victors. Brendan Rodgers' side, or Brendan Rodgers hoops off to a fluid start, was what I wrote down on my sheet. They were fabulous to watch. They were very fluid, very kind of comfortable in their play, dominant, controlled the game. Kilmarnock really offered nothing on any front. They had over 30 shots in the game, Celtic, and people will say, well, it's Celtic. They're the best team. They've got one of the biggest budgets in the league. They should be beating a team like Kilmarnock by a comfortable victory at home on the opening day of the season. But let's not forget, last season Kilmarnock beat Celtic twice, once in the Cup, once in the league. They drew with Celtic at Celtic Park last season by 1-1. So it certainly hasn't been a walk in the park for Celtic previously against Kilmarnock. This time, though, they looked a lot more comfortable. The opening goal from Reo Hatate, lead was then doubled by Liam Scales with a header before half-time. The third goal scored by Nicholas Kuhn, the right winger. The German right winger made it 3 before Anthony Ralston made it 4 in added time. So a pretty comfortable afternoon for Celtic. As I said, the Dundee derby was the exciting one, the 2-2 draw, very competitive game. Dundee United, of course, the newly promoted side from the Scottish Championship. There could have been a lot of pressure on them against Dundee side, who got into the top 6 in their first season after promotion in the last campaign, but they looked unfortunate at times. Dundee United looked well up for the action, a really good atmosphere around Tannadice at the weekend, and probably should have won that game, Dundee United, unfortunately conceding that late penalty to end up drawing the game. But it's a positive start, a competent start, and I'm sure they'll look to build from that Dundee United. Other results, as I said, Hibs beaten comfortably. Hibs finished in the bottom half of the Scottish Premiership last season, a very disappointing season last campaign, but St Mirren already proving that they're not going to be it's not going to be a walk in the park this season for Hibs either, beating them by 3-0. As St Mirren became the first side to win this week at the weekend. As I said, Aberdeen beat St Johnstone 2-1. Aberdeen also had a difficult season last season, finishing in the bottom half. They want to replicate, or kind of rectify for that disappointing result. And of course, Motherwell Ross County 0-0. Positive result, I would say, for Ross County, considering the fact they were probably the second best in that game. They got a draw out of it, and they are favourites for relegation alongside St Johnstone. So any sort of points, even though it's still early in the season, any sort of points are good. So that was match week 1. Let's talk about what's coming up this weekend then in the Scottish Premiership. Of course, another full roster of fixtures. Let's start with the team that dropped points in the opening weekend of the season, Rangers. They host Motherwell Saturday at 3 o'clock. So first home game of the season at Ibrox under Philippe Clermont for the new campaign. They would feel that they need to be energised. They need to be kind of reactive. They need to kind of build back and give their crowd something to cheer for against Motherwell, and give them something to really kind of grapple on to early in the season. Because Rangers were haphazard against Hearts, a difficult away game respectively, but you're at home against the side who again themselves struggled on match day 1. You're deemed to be slightly the better team on paper, and we'll see how that builds, of course. But we talked about it in the stream for Rangers on Saturday. They lost a lot of experienced players. There's a very youthful glow to Rangers, but sometimes that can count as inexperienced and actually be counterintuitive in the end. But we'll see how they respond to that opening day draw as they face Motherwell at home this Saturday. Celtic are in action again, and that's live on LFS. We'll have a live commentary of Hibs against Celtic on Sunday at 12:30. A kick-off there between Hibs and Celtic. Hibs comfortably beaten at the weekend, Celtic comfortably winning. So very contrasting results on their opening weekends for those two clubs. We'll see if Hibs can get on the board against a very fluid and very resilient Celtic side, but also a Celtic side that are flowing in great confidence at the moment after their pre-season. Then that opening day victory will give them confidence. But an away game at Hibs, again, has never been a foregone conclusion for Celtic that they would win that game. They have dropped points fairly recently beforehand, but there's no guarantees on anything there. But Celtic were hoping to make it 6 points from 6 under Brendan Rodgers at the weekend. Other games include Aberdeen St Mirren, Ross County Dundee United are both Saturday 3 o'clockers for you to keep an eye on. Dundee Hearts, Dundee FC that is, and Hearts, they're a Saturday 5:30 kickoff. And a Sunday 3 o'clock kickoff is Kilmarnock against St Johnstone. Right, that's the wrap up of the Scottish Premiership. So Celtic off to a perfect start. Rangers maybe stumbling at the first hurdle. And we'll see how the rest react to that over the coming weeks. Because there is an Old Firm derby coming up in about 3 weeks' time. So it's not much for these two to gather themselves. And we'll talk more about Rangers at the end of the show, as they were in Champions League qualifying action last night. We'll talk about that amongst the other results as well a bit later on. To pre-season talk then, and this is the part that I've been looking forward to the most. Not because, being a Liverpool fan, I can talk about Liverpool and their really good pre-season under the new manager, but I can talk about what's going wrong elsewhere. It's not been a hunky-dory pre-season for all of the clubs in the Premier League, and let's start with the one on the left. 3 bald men on the on the graphic, and all very contrasting looks. A sad Ten Hag, a happy Slot, and a pretty angry Maresca. Let's talk about the 3 of them then, and let's start with Manchester United. And it looks like a sad Ten Hag, because similar ideas of last season. Injuries are the big headline for Manchester United. New signing Lenny Yoro, out until November. He spoke on the 28th of July, Erik Ten Hag, for this on this injury, and said we have to wait over 24 hours and then we hopefully know more. We were very careful, especially with Lenny. He did only 50% from the sessions, so it was very disappointing that he had to come off, but let's be positive and see what is coming out. What has come out is that he won't be available until near Christmas time. The 23rd of November is the potential return date for Lenny Yoro. Not played a competitive game for Manchester United, and he will not do so until the Christmas tree is up. An ankle/foot injury is what is regarded as his reason for being out. Tyrell Malacia has gone on a disappearing act once again. Unavailable for the vast majority of last season, Malacia. He's out with a knee injury until October. Tyrell is now in a good place, but he is not here because I only took players who could play games or be available for team training. Is not that far off, but is now in a progress situation. I think it will be possible in 2 months. So October is the hinted date for Tyrell Malacia's return. Also, Rasmus Højlund, the star striker for Manchester United, he will not be available until mid-September for a thigh injury. A hamstring strain was the regarded status of that. Mid-September is his return, so after the first international break of the season. A couple of other players that are have found themselves injured after the Liverpool game at the weekend. 4 to be exact. Will Fish, the young player, an ankle-foot injury. No return date at this moment in time. Also no return date for Johnny Evans, who also had to be subbed at half-time, but that was due to illness, so it doesn't look like it's a massive injury, but illness is the cause there. Victor Lindelof was taken off also in that game as a precaution, according to Erik ten Hag, but he said they'll have to see how bad it will be. So precaution or how bad it will be. Big gap between those two explanations, but we'll see what comes of Victor Lindelof and also Harry Maguire. He was left out as a precaution as well. So a couple of injuries, quite a number of injuries that Manchester United need to grapple with early in the season, but that has been the similar theme with Manchester United over last season. They were absolutely bogged down with injuries and quite consistently used that as an excuse for their poor football. And to be fair, they had more centre-back partnerships than hot dinners last season. Let's be honest, they had over 20 different partnerships in the defensive positions last season. They couldn't get a starting left back. Luke Shaw was injured for the majority of the season. Tyrell Malacia had gone missing, so they were playing a kind of a centre back at left back, then or a right back at left back at times, and Dalot, or even at Wan-Bissaka. At right back, it wasn't consistent because they didn't know who was playing left back, so they had to decide on right back. Plus, their centre backs were constantly in and out, like they're doing the hokey cokey the whole way through the season. So, plus they've no Varane now, which is even more difficult for Manchester United. The fact that a number of their injuries, Johnny Evans, Victor Lindelof, Harry Maguire, and Lenny Yoro, are their four main centre backs. Not good. Four of their main centre backs, that is. And of course, they do have Lisandro Martinez in there as well. Right, so that's Manchester United, and we'll talk more about their pre-season when we talk about the Community Shield preview in a few moments' time. But quite contrastingly, their neighbours, not too far to the west of Manchester, try to think of the map in my head there, west of Manchester on Merseyside, Liverpool. New manager Arne Slot, brought in after Jurgen Klopp said that last season would be his last season, and the farewell tour concluded. Arne Slot has come in, wanted to assess his squad in pre-season and see where they were before looking at signings. At the moment, his assessments, I'm sure, will be pretty positive. 3 wins out of their 3 pre-season games so far for Liverpool: a 1-0 win against Betis, a 2-1 victory against Arsenal, and a 3-0 victory over Manchester United in their 3 pre-season games on the US leg of the tour. They still have 2 more to go. Both pre-season games will be played on Sunday with the return of all their main starters as well. So it looks pretty hunky-dory for Arne Slot at the moment. And from the football that they've played, and I've been watching them because I'm a Liverpool fan, keep the secret quiet, but from the football they've played so far this season, in the pre-season, look, you can't look too much into pre-season and results and all that, and I put that as kind of like a tongue-in-cheek moment, but it's been good football. They've adapted well. There's some young players that have impressed. I think Arne Slot's got a good grouping with him, and of course it's not that Liverpool need major surgery under the new manager. They have a very good side that finished 3rd last season under Jurgen Klopp. They've got a bare bones of a very good side. They've got that extra experience now, having a lot of those players who come in last summer and got that full Premier League experience. So they have a new manager, a new system to adopt, but they have that Premier League experience. They can add to that on the new season, and it looks pretty comfortable for Liverpool at the moment, and they look pretty happy with the way things are going. Arne Slot, the new era at Liverpool, is off to a pretty good start. But of course, they open their season away at Ipswich on Saturday the 17th of August, so 10 days' time, at 12:30 kick-off. A trip to Portman Road, newly promoted Ipswich, for Liverpool. Right, the third of our bald men on this screen is Enzo Maresca, the new man at Chelsea, another new manager at Chelsea. I mean, many times we said that over the last 2 years, 3 years even. There's too many to count. You actually cannot count them on one hand. There's been more than 5, so you have to use 2 hands, maybe even 3 hands, to count how many managers Chelsea have had. But anyway, getting off topic, there has been an interesting story developing here about Chelsea, how they haven't had the best pre-season. If we kind of look at Chelsea's pre-season, if I can get the graphic up, or not the graphic, the stats up on my screen, it's not been a positive pre-season for Chelsea. They were beaten, of course, last night by Real Madrid. But of their 5 Premier League, or their 5 friendlies, they play 6 in total. They've played 5 already. They've 1 more to come on Sunday at Stamford Bridge. But they started on the 25th of July. They played Wrexham in the US. They drew 2-2. With Wrexham, they lost 4-1 to Celtic. Won 3-0 against America. Then lost 4-2 to Man City, and then lost 2-1 to Real Madrid. So it's been a very mixed up and down pre-season, but Enzo Maresca himself has come out and talked about Chelsea's pre-season, not in glowing terms, but in pretty stark terms. This is the story that was released this morning. Chelsea's US tour ended another defeat, with Real Madrid winning 2-1 in Charlotte, and Blues boss Enzo Maresca bemoaning historical issues with the team's high line for their defensive issues. In a post-match interview, Enzo Maresca said, it's a problem that we are trying to solve in pre-season since day one, said the Italian after seeing goals inside the first half hour from Dani Ceballos and Brahim Diaz, gave the Champions League winners the advantage before Noni Madueke pulled one back with a header before half-time. One of my first meetings with the squad was about the number of goals we conceded last year, with the defensive line being very high. It is something that we are trying to work on. Today, offensively, once again, I think we were there because the patterns are there and we created chances. The problem has been defensively, and when I say defensively, I don't just mean the defensive line, all of the players. It is a habit. We are not working on playing with the defensive line higher. It is a habit from last year or from years ago. I don't know. But we are trying to drop the defensive line by 4 or 5 metres so that we have the advantage and don't concede the balls in behind. Last season we conceded many goals with this problem, and hopefully we can solve this problem very soon. Stark and interesting from Enzo Maresca there, but clearly he doesn't like Chelsea's high line that they had in previous seasons, last season and previously so, and doesn't feel that that is the move that he wants to make. He wants to drop them a bit deeper and play a different style of football. But Enzo Maresca is certainly getting his words out there, and certainly not happy with the tactics that Chelsea have imposed in pre-season. But we will see how they do. We haven't talked about the two teams that finished in the top two of the Premier League last season, Arsenal or Manchester City. We'll talk about Man City in the Community Shield preview, but Arsenal haven't got a mention, and I've just realised that, and I feel bad, because Arsenal haven't had an awful pre-season. They're unusually playing a lot less than a couple of their other opponents. Same with Liverpool, they've only played 3 pre-season games. They drew 1-1 with Bournemouth, but won on penalties. In their first game, they then won 2-1 against Manchester United, but then lost. There was a penalty shootout in that one for whatever reason, and then lost 2-1 to Liverpool. So very contrasting pre-season for Arsenal. But they will play this evening in what is regarded as their final club friendly, unless they add another to the calendar, which is pretty early to end your pre-season friendlies. But Arsenal seemingly doing so, and they play Bayer Leverkusen at 6 o'clock this evening at the Emirates Stadium. So Arsenal involved in pre-season action a bit later for you there. Right, so that's pre-season talk. Let's talk about Manchester City and Manchester United then. The Community Shield this Saturday, 3 o'clock. It's regarded as kind of the curtain raiser for the new season of English football. And the two Manchester clubs will face it out. Of course, the Premier League champions on the left, the FA Cup winners on the right. Manchester United, who beat Manchester City in the FA Cup 2-1 at Wembley in the final game of the season for these two clubs, and they'll be hoping to finish where they left off last season. Manchester United with a Community Shield victory. Their build-up to the Community Shield hasn't been the most impressive, and certainly not been the most kind to them in terms of injury front, as I've already previously mentioned. But in that case, Manchester United may have a bit of work to do in that sense. Manchester City haven't had it all their own way either in pre-season. Let's just run you through their pre-season fixtures results so far. Let's start with Manchester City then. They lost 4-3 to Celtic, 3-2 loss to AC Milan, a 2-2 draw but lost on penalties to Barcelona, and a 4-2 win over Chelsea. So a few close defeats on those occasions, but they got better and better, and they won by 4-2 against Chelsea, including an Erling Haaland hat-trick in that one of their pre-season games. Manchester United, well, they've played quite a lot of pre-season games, 5 to be exact. They lost 1-0 to Rosenborg, 2-0 win against Rangers, a 2-1 loss to Arsenal, a 3-2 win against Betis, and a 3-0 loss to Liverpool in their pre-season games for Manchester United. So both have had various numbers of games to build up to this Community Shield, regarded as their final kind of preparation before the Premier League season gets underway a week. Manchester United gets underway 6 days after the Community Shield. Of course, they play the Friday night game that's going to kick off the new Premier League season, but the Community Shield a bit later than usual this season. Of course, it's usually in the first week of August, but of course, because of the Euros, everything's been pushed back a week. So that's why it's this Saturday, the 10th of August, at 3 o'clock kickoff. We'll have, of course, the final result from that this Saturday. We're yet to find out whether we'll be doing that game, but of course, we'll keep you posted on that basis in the coming days on that front. But Manchester City will feel that, why not grab a trophy early in the season and try and kick off well. Manchester United will be thinking exactly the same thing. A Community Shield can be, if for the winner, it's regarded as a positive start to the new season. It's good of what we can come. It's a good foundation to build upon. Whereas the loser will then say, it's just a glorified friendly. It's not really much to it. We're not really worried. It's just another game where we can gain fitness and gain kind of tactical advantage before the new season gets underway. So it's basically one of those ones where the winner loves it and bigs it up massively, and the loser ends up saying it's not really worth very much to us and we're not really worried. But we'll see what comes of it. Saturday, 3 o'clock, we will be seeing that one. Right, finally to Champions League qualifying, and Rangers, who drew in the Scottish Premiership weekend, followed up with another draw in Champions League third round qualifying. Last night, their trip to Dynamo Kyiv saw them draw at 1-1. They conceded in the first half, Rangers, Andrei Yarmolenko, the Ukrainian, of course, put Kyiv in front before Rangers equalised in the 94th minute. Cyril Dessers got the equaliser for Rangers to secure a draw out of that one. Of course, it's only the first leg, so the second leg will be played at Ibrox next midweek to see who will then progress to the Champions League playoffs. Also in third qualifying action last night, Ludogorets beat Karabag 2-1. POAK and Malmö drew 2-2. Midtjylland beat Ferencvaros 2-0. Sparta Prague drew 1-1 with FCSB. Lille beat Fenerbahce 2-1, and RB Salzburg beat Twente by 2-1. 3 more of those Champions League qualifiers to come this evening. Slavia Prague against Union Saint-Gilloise. Slovan Bratislava take on APOEOL, and Jagiellonia face Bodo Glimt. Rangers do know, though, if they are to progress, they will be facing an opponent. I'm trying to figure out who that opponent is. I'm not too sure at this very moment, but there was a draw done for the Champions League playoffs, which will be played in the final week of August, the 27th, 28th of August, and the draw for the main stage, or what was previously known the group stage of the Champions League, which will have more of a league phase under the new format for the new season. That draw will be done on the 29th of August. So we'll keep our ears pricked for that one. Well, that is the LFS podcast for this week. We've talked about transfers, we've talked about the Scottish Premiership, talked about pre-season, the Community Shield and Champions League. Lots more to come. The LFS podcast is back for the new season, and we have football back for the new season. We witnessed the Scottish Premiership back 3 games from last weekend. We have more to come for you. Friday night action to get the EFL Championship back for you. 2 games on Friday night. We start with Blackburn against Derby, and at the same time Preston take on Sheffield United. We'll have updates from that one. Deepdale, forgot Preston's ground there. Preston, Sheffield United will have updates of. We'll have live audio commentary of Blackburn against Derby. Derby back in the Championship from League One promotion last season. Blackburn, who almost went the opposite direction, just about stayed up, and they will face each other at Ewood Park on Friday night. That is also our weekend full of action. We have Hibs Celtic on Sunday 12:30, Sheffield Wednesday and Plymouth at Sunday at 4:30, and Monday night we will have Luton Burnley, 2 sides relegated from the Premier League last season. They face off at Kenilworth Road on Monday night. But that is it from the LFS podcast. Thanks very much for joining us, and we will see you very shortly. Next week I'll be doing my Premier League predictions on who will finish where, who will be the champions, who will be relegated, and who will get European football. We'll predict all of that next week, so join us then for the LFS Podcast. For now, thanks very much for watching and have a very good afternoon. Bye bye.